See review, is Apple TV Plus' Game of Thrones wannabe worth watching? Last year, as Apple was lining up programming for its new streaming service, Apple TV Plus, reports emerged claiming its content offerings would largely be family-friendly, eschewing blood and gory violence, profanity-laden dialogues, and adult-oriented themes that have powered most of the biggest TV dramas of all time. Essentially, Apple was going to do a Disney. But last month's unveiling of the initial slate revealed those reports were seemingly unfounded. Set aside those shows aimed at children, the 6 others at launch or shortly upcoming: post-apocalyptic fantasy alt history sci-fi for all mankind, news drama The Morning Show, psychological thriller Servant, biographical comedy Dickinson, and true crime drama Truth Be Told, are all certified A in India, TVMA or TV14 in the US. C is possibly the most adult of them all, considering it's clearly trying to be the new Game of Thrones. Apple reportedly spent $15 million, about Rs. 106 crores per episode on C, equivalent to what HBO did for Thrones' final season, which is laughable for an unproven show with no existing fanbase. Peaky Blinders creator Stephen Knight is at the helm. That explains the graphic throat slits amongst other brutal scenes, of C, which is set centuries after a virus decimated the human population and deprived the survivors of the ability to see. Now, vision exists only as a myth, and anyone who talks about it is dubbed a heretic. For the Apple series, that's simply an excuse to force its world back to the Dark Ages, even before Game of Thrones' equivalent setting of the Middle Ages. But the comparisons to the hit HBO series are superficial, as with the inclusion of a possible incestual relationship between a nephew and his aunt. C has nothing to offer beyond its surface-level premise and violence, no gripping plot, no interesting characters, and no relevant messaging. It's an empty husk of a show. The only ideas that are touched upon in the first 3 episodes of the total 8, that's what critics, including us, had access to, are motherhood, family bonds, and tribe mentality, but C doesn't know how to craft emotional scenes or build them up. Francis Lawrence, behind 3 of the 4 Hunger Games films, is the director. Moreover, the Apple series is dry, self-serious, and humorless, which makes it more reminiscent of Britannia than Game of Thrones. C opens with a woman named Magra, Hira Hilmar, giving birth to twins, a boy and a girl, in a cave, with help from a mysterious midwife called Paris, Alfred Woodard. Magra's husband, but not the father of her children, Barbara Voss, Jason Momoa, meanwhile, is off on the front lines with other members of his tribe, the Alkenny. He's trying to thwart an assault by the Witchfinders led by Tamik T. Jun, Christian Camargo, who has been tipped off by an Alkenny snitch called Getherback's Mojin Arya that the baby's father is Jerlamaril Joshua Henry, a lone warrior who can see. Jun has been tasked with finding and capturing him at the behest of Queen Cain, Sylvia Hoeks, and his children become prime targets as well after they are born with sight. With help from Jerlamaril, the Alkenny escape from the Witchfinders' clutches and settle in a new land, where Barbara Voss cuts him off from the rest of the world to protect his children, now named Kofun, Archie Madekwe, and Hanawa, Nestor Cooper. After Magra, Barbara, and Paris learn the kids can see, they decide to hide the truth from the rest of their tribe, since some of them were willing to hand the babies over to save their own skin. And that was before the Alkenny knew the children were heretics. For nearly 2 decades, the kids then grow up in isolation and secret, using their eyesight to help others and themselves. Meanwhile, Gether, who bears ill will towards Barbara and Paris for having burnt his mother at the stake, keeps trying to sabotage the whole thing. Off in lands far away, Queen Cain, leader of the Payan tribe, is battling dissenting subordinate voices and hence intentionally preaches contrasting philosophies to retain power. Publicly, she blames Vision for causing the apocalypse in the first place, claiming men did evil deeds because they could see. Empty words considering the pain and destruction caused by the Witchfinders. Privately, Cain reveals she wants to find Jerlamaril so she can use him to bring more babies with sight into the world, which would help make her stronger. Her palace, which is set inside an abandoned dam that generates hydroelectricity, is one of a few remnants of the futuristic past on C, alongside a record player, the only piece of technology on screen, owned by Cain. The biggest problem with C is on a script level, as the writing virtually gives us no insight into its characters, who seemingly exist to move the narrative forward. Forget hinting at potential character arcs, we know barely anything about most of the protagonists and antagonists after the first 3 episodes. Barbara Voss, Queen Kane, and Getherbax are the most developed of the lot, and by most, we mean very little, while we are given next to nothing for Paris and Magra, who can be described as simply the mother. As further proof of how little it has to say, characters repeat the same thing over and over when it comes to their primary motivation or stance on a topic. It's almost as if C thinks its audience can't be bothered to focus on what's happening on screen. Jason Momoa as Barbara Voss in C photo credit, Apple. Beyond the lackluster writing, C also fails to deliver on action sequences, which are usually reliant on the stupidity of villains to allow the heroes to come out as victors. They also betray a lack of scale at times, all the more surprising if Apple has really spent the reported figure of $15 million per episode on C. Game of Thrones shot its initial seasons at half of that average budget, and the HBO show still managed to look more impressive. C's character roster is much smaller than Thrones as well, where there were so many families that it could repeatedly kill primary characters for much of its runtime without crippling the narrative. That means there are less stakes to its action too, since C can't afford to kill off any of its core group of characters. Additionally, C's central conceit, a virus that killed most and blinded the rest, does turn into a bit of a joke now and then since everyone is a bit of a daredevil on the Apple series. Relying on the scientific backing of how losing one sense rewires the brain and boosts others, C essentially grants superpowers to its characters. With everyone on the show being blind, that means everyone has more acute hearing, with different applications ranging from detecting lies, estimating the size of an incoming threat, and sensing movement beyond the horizon. A select few others have more equipped noses that allows them to pick up on abstract things such as fear, which isn't as helpful, naturally. But the lack of variety lessens the appeal. All that comes together to make up a show that has clearly nothing going for it. Strangely, Apple has already renewed C for a second season before it has even released, though a report claims that the series will see a change at the top, which means either of Knight or Lawrence, or both, are set to make way for someone else. Whether that will improve C is debatable though, given its current status as a disastrous, utterly forgettable attempt to be the next Game of Thrones. There's no shortage of contenders in the space too, what with Amazon, Netflix, and HBO itself all trying to fill that void. But for Apple, the quality of its originals is paramount since it's not going to offer anything else, unlike others. Sure, it has money to throw at TV+, but C is proof that its customers should think twice. For more updates, subscribe and share this video.